Recently, I found myself going through my archive of photos where I was photographing my home and family, realizing one of the greatest mistakes I had once made as an inexperienced photographer was that I was believing that I needed to travel so far in order to find these amazing narratives or stories that my photography should be about or revolve around. Failing to realize that in order to do that and in order to learn about storytelling, meaning and intention and other things that I would probably apply to my later projects, I must first practice it in my most familiar surroundings. The things I see on my everyday life. And I guess it took me years of living away from home and family in other countries to realize that the most essential skills I can learn comes from within and stems from capturing the things that had always been, in one way or another, immediate to me. So welcome to another video, and today we're going to be going through the work of another photographer that I will introduce to you and here on the channel. I've been a great fan of his work, and we're also going to mix it a little bit with some of my images, and we're going to be discussing an invaluable skill and also some mistakes that I've made along the road until I learned this. And so I guess that it's time to grab a drink, make yourself comfortable, and let's go straight to another video. So this skill that I'm going to highlight during this video is not really about finding value in the everyday life and that general advice that we've all heard at some point in time, but rather to try and see what you've always known for the very first time. And in doing this exercise, what does that tell you about who you are as a photographer, and what themes or ideas do you feel up to exploring in your photography? Essentially, this is an exercise of retraining your eyes to perceive value in what's always been there. Or at least, that's the best way I can find right now to put it into words. But for that, I want to introduce you Larry Sultan and what exactly I learned with Larry Sultan about photographing what is familiar to me, in this case to us. With Larry Sultan, I learned about what I can call an almost lost art in today's current trends within the photography world, and that is the art of photographing the familial. It might not be necessarily a lost art, as there might be several people doing it and I'm just unaware of it, but I can certainly pinpoint a time, particularly in Western photography, where photographing one's family was incredibly popular, and I would locate this trend geographically in the US during the 80s and 90s in particular. And this is due to the popularity of the work of Sally Mann, for instance, that made headlines back then with her book Immediate Family, which was controversial at the time. And by the way, I've explored her story in another video, so if you want to check it out, you're more than welcome. But someone else that comes to mind is also Tina Barney, who made beautiful large format photos of her wealthy family based in the East Coast. And also around this time, of course, and particularly of interest for us, is the work of Larry Sultan that comes along during this period with his career-defining Pictures from Home, which he photographed from 1983 to around 1992. Sultan's Pictures from Home is often interpreted as an ambiguous visual memoir, if you will, that explores the idea of an all-American family, the confront of the masculine and feminine energies, as well as, in my opinion, the idea of the American dream of the quote-unquote making it, but the implications of it. And also, in my opinion, I would propose as well, based on my observation of his images and, the study of his work, I would say that it can draw as well a parallel with the idea of the illusion of the American dream. And what does it mean when you have it all, when you conquer it all? What's next? And what does it implicate in your life? And I think as well, what did it take you? Or rather, what did you lose in that sort of path of conquering your dreams? And I think it's an interesting point of view, and I'll make this bridge with other works of Larry Sultan and how we can observe that. And speaking on the intentions of Larry Sultan for this project, he said at a time when he released it that, quote, the institution of the family was being used as an inspirational symbol by resurgent conservatives, and I wanted to puncture this mythology of the family and show what happens when we are driven by images of success. And I was willing to use my family to prove a point. And this is something that I find fascinating about Larry Sultan's work. He focuses on this idea of the social construct, the image of something, and then the reality of it. I think I can draw perhaps a parallel, if you guys like to read, with the work of Richard Yates, who actually wrote, most famously amongst other books, Revolutionary Road. And he focuses precisely on this idea of appearances and how things can appear so perfect in a way, but then when you look within and you peel the layers, there's a lot of complex issues, in terms of whether it's a family or whether it is like a person that appears to have, from the outside looking in, a very, normal, successful, by all means, life. And so after the success of Pictures from Home, Larry Sultan goes on working on different projects where he seems to focus on this idea of appearances, social constructs, and the way people live them, and are simultaneously victims of it. This can be seen in other bodies of work that he left us with, such as San Francisco Society, which is a pretty self-explanatory title about what the content is about. And he also worked on another great body of work I also appreciate, titled The Valley. And in this one, though, it's slightly more complex, but essentially it revolves around porn sets in the San Fernando Valley area of LA, which was apparently back in the day considered the Silicon Valley of the corn industry. And yes, I'm using the word corn instead of the actual other word because YouTube is not a big fan of the other word. So that's just a disclaimer. And I've made this sort of review of Sultan's career to conclude that through the study of his own family home, and life, his closest relationships, Sultan as a photographer was able to discover a style and ideas that he carried through the rest of his career. And the main one, in my humble opinion, is the focus on the artificiality of life, on how life is such a paradox at times, and this plasticity that we associate at times with life. But you might be asking now, legitimately, but what's so important here, or what's the skill here that I've been talking about? And I can tell you that the skill of photographing what is familiar to you comes with the understanding that your home and family are ultimately the vehicle for the dominant traits of your life and the way you perceive reality. And we know that photography is just that. It's about capturing life through the way you see it. But of course, I don't want to sound inconsiderate here. Some people might not have a family anymore or might not be in touch for various reasons, but we all have in life some type of route or some things or place, if you will, that is familiar to us. Photos of our ancestors, objects that we associate with early memories too can be a good option. So starting here and what is most familiar is probably where you're going to find important answers about yourself and your work as a photographer. And what's so valuable about learning to capture what you've always seen, what you might even consider boring, what you see every day. You'll definitely learn to recognize more value everywhere else you go, because you might perceive or have a superior capacity for the understanding of other narratives once you start with the most difficult narrative you have, and that is what's right in front of you. Because that's how we function as humans. We often disregard what's in front of us because it's always been there and favor other narratives instead within the unknown without really having the skills that we could have if we had been working closer to home. And so this is what I find so valuable about Larry Sultan, and the skill he teaches us is that we need to involuntarily almost start with the familiar as photographers, because then we're going to practice intention, storytelling, and all these things that we often hear about, but it's very hard to put into, practice, especially in other places that you don't know about. So you start with the most challenging one, which is the places that you've been to all your life, and you start there with trying to build a narrative, trying to create a sequence of photos. And so I think this is the importance, or what I take more relevant, I'd say, from the work of Larry Sultan. Basically going back and focusing on the most important people in your life, the most important places, the most important things that, kind of like are anchors in your life, and realize then who you are as a photographer, what you want to say with your photography, your intention. And this is the invaluable exercise that Larry Sultan offers us with these pictures from home. And he had been a photographer before, of course, and he had done other bodies of work, but I think pictures from home really was a mark for his career. And I think after that, I can see how his perspective kind of, tweaked here and there, because obviously different subjects and whatnot came to play in his different projects. But this idea of focusing on the artificiality of life, this idea of social construct was always there. And so it's something that I believe he took from exploring this, what is familiar or what was familiar to him. And yeah, I guess this was helpful in any way, shape, or form. I really want to thank you so much for watching today's video, for supporting the channel. Links to my work are down below. Links to the members community is down below. Everything relevant to Larry Sultan as well. I really recommend discovering his photography. It's really, really good. And yeah, I guess that I'll see you in the next video. So take care, stay safe, keep shooting, keep creating, keep learning photography, and I'm out.